And on today's episode...
That wasn't funny. You did the hands thing and it reminded me that I can't say this correctly.
It's fine. I almost started laughing when I started it, but then I rallied, Lauren. I rallied.
I shouldn't have done that. I put my eye bone on your table. Ow.
You jerk. What did my table do to your eye bone?
Oh, man.
Here we go.
I hate when some of the episodes are just me laughing. I find you way too amusing, Jesi.
Thank God someone does.
Ready graphics? Ready theme?
Good evening. For your information tonight.
Hi, I'm Jesi Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And this is FYI.
The Murphy Brown Podcast.
She's babbling about Babylonia.
Boxes of boxes of
Yes.
boxes of Girl Scout
Boxes
cookies.
of boxes. An invasion of her derriere space.
Are highways safer in 89?
And on today's episode...
We'll be talking about Season 1, Episode 19, The Unshrinkable Murphy Brown. Hi, this is Lauren.
Hey, this is Jesi.
And welcome to another episode.
Of FYI.
We just kind of said that.
I know. We're trying so hard to be natural.
Welcome to Sweeps. This aired May 1st, 1989.
Look at you just throwing in that little nugget of information.
May 1st, 1989 is also my mother's birthday.
Well, you better remember it then.
Yeah. My mother is only a few days older than Candice Bergen, and as a kid, I thought that was super awesome.
It is super awesome.
Mm-hmm. I like me the Tauruses. Why don't you tell people who directed this episode? Because I don't think they know.
Oh, hey, it's an up-and-coming director, Barnett Kellman.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
The Barnett Kellman.
The Barnett Kellman of Barnett Kellman.
Never heard of him before.
Ever.
No.
What a weird thing to say in my mouth. The title of this episode is a play on the phrase "the unsinkable Molly Brown," which is based on the musical and then film, all about Margaret Brown, who posthumously was known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Funny enough, Margaret Brown actually went by Maggie, by all of her friends, but somehow her nickname became Molly Brown.
Well, she was sort of a personality, right?
Yeah, but
So
her nickname to everyone was Maggie. But somehow after the Titanic, it became the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Most people will probably know this as the movie, not the play, starred Debbie Reynolds. Mm-hmm. And many people have referred to Debbie Reynolds as unsinkable.
And she is.
Yeah, it's a family trait.
But yes, so that was someone who just couldn't be stopped. And you definitely would remember her from the movie Titanic. They gave her a lot of credit. She was an amazing woman. She actually picked up an oar after helping people evacuate and get on lifeboats. She picked up an oar with the men. She was awesome.
Now, because Unshrinkable is not a known title, we keep calling it the Unsinkable Murphy Brown.
Or the Unshrinkable Murphy Brown.
As well as because we use Google Drive.
Yes.
Spell check keeps correcting every time we write it.
And poor Lauren, who is told all of you about her lifelong struggles with dyslexia, is constantly writing the correct thing, and then it's fixing it, quote unquote, for her. And then I just want everyone to give a quiet listener applause for Lauren for
Thank you.
saying the title of this episode.
It's been a hardship.
It's
been
hilarious.
I'm so glad that I'm a survivor, really. This was written by Denise Moss and Cy Dukane. Denise has actually sent us some of her thoughts.
Yes.
And as we mentioned previously when we spoke about And So He Goes, us and Denise got those episodes confused.
Yes.
Many times.
The dead people episodes.
Yes. In fact, Denise said that Candace jokingly at one point referred to them as the Death Riders.
Yes. It's a never-ending source of fascination for humanity.
And they were still freelance at this point.
Which is why we don't have their bios in the book.
Apologize. Something I thought that was really lovely that Corby told us in email about them was that they knew each other from My Sister Sam. And she felt they came up with the most interesting stories, great minds. And something that we always forget is that they didn't become staff writers until season 3.
Which is nuts.
Nuts, yeah.
I assumed it was season 2.
Yeah, we did, yeah. Corby corrected us.
Yep. So, this episode opens with, if any of you have been on our website, we have under our bios our favorite season 1 episode and our favorite season 1 song. This happens to open with my favorite season 1 song, which is Say a Little Prayer, which some of you, if you don't know the original, probably remember from My Best Friend's Wedding. became very popular. The version I grew up with is the one that is used in this episode, which is the version sung by Aretha Franklin. But originally, that song was written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David for Dionne Warwick. And it originally peaked at number 4 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 Pop Singles chart in December of 1967. On the R&B chart, singles chart, it peaked at number 8. The concept behind the song was that it is a woman's point of view and concern for a man in Vietnam, which I'm not sure a lot of people actually know about.
I didn't know.
I learned that, I think, in high school because went down a trivia hole, and it just forever kind of changed that song for me. It returned to the pop and R&B top 10 in the fall of 1968 when it was recorded by Aretha Franklin and taken from her 68 album, Aretha Now. And it changed...
What?
I'm sorry. I just saw Lauren's note that says, Jesi will now speak about my best friend's wedding. Because it's so good. There's people with lobster hands in the background dancing to it. You can't say no.
I know you so well.
Rupert Everett and lobster hands in the background. I love you so much. Jesi will now speak about my best friend's wedding. Also, the song was reused in the 2010 revival of Promises, Promises. It's a great song. It's so good to dance to.
I love it. And it's interesting that it is Burt Bacharach because if it wasn't Aretha, we would not be hearing a lot of Burt Bacharach songs
Absolutely.
on Murphy Brown.
Yes. Well, Aretha and then Austin Powers.
Yes, some people may,
But Aretha is the reason that it was as big
Hey,
as
listen,
it was.
Burt Bacharach also recorded a lot with Elvis Costello,
Yes.
and I love Elvis Costello. He also wrote the songs from a movie I think I've talked about on the show before, Grace of My Heart.
Yes.
So quickly before we start, this episode we were informed by Denise is kind of based on a Hollywood trivia. So she really credits Cy Dukane. She says that he's sort of a treasure trove of Hollywood stories and trivia. And he'd read one in, she believes, Dick Cavett's book. That and if anyone's not familiar with Dick Cavett, amazing interviewer, particularly in the 60s and 70s. You've probably seen a lot of his interviews when they talk about, someone like Betty Davis. You see a lot of footage recently of Dick Cavett when there might be, a profile on Betty Davis or Katharine Hepburn because a lot of people in, the end of their lives came on the show. He just interviewed a lot of different variety of people and was a big talk show host. So he had someone on called Jerome, and I hope I say this right, Rodale. He was an early organic food pioneer and all-around health fanatic, and he dropped dead on the show. And what struck Cy funny about the story was that Cavett was such a good writer that when enlisting help from the audience, he sort of stumbled in the words, and instead of saying, "Is there a doctor in the house?" Too cliche, it came out, "Is there a doctor in the audience?" And they both sort of loved that. And they also really loved the irony that here was this practitioner of, good health, and he literally was bragging on the show how he was going to live to be 100 because of the things that, being a health nut. She wrote, it wasn't even close. The show never aired, but they thought, what if this happened to Murphy? And the show was live, obviously, and what if she interpreted that she killed him through her tough questioning? Obviously, in this case, they didn't get a guy who was a health nut, but they did cast someone that they felt didn't look,
The healthiest.
The healthiest, yeah. So that's interesting. I read a little bit about what actually happened, and this episode never aired, by the way, obviously. But kind of like here in the show, which we'll get to, he sort of just kind of slumped down, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And then they realized that he had died.
Ugh. Well, let's talk about it, huh?
Yeah.
So we open with one of what I think is quite possibly my favorite opening sequence of this episode. So you're watching the studio from the same angle throughout the day.
Oh, that's true.
And what I love is we open with just one person in there. It's an empty studio. The janitor is cleaning. And there's like the drapes over the set pieces, and there's a basketball hoop in the background. Then, and this entire time, Say a Little Prayer is playing. Then it fades, and now we're in the first round of setup. So there's somebody working with the boom mic, somebody's cleaning above, there's a coffee table. Murphy comes storming in, looking a little sulky. She's wearing a blue rain jacket and one of those like fisherman's caps that they wear. And she very sulkily takes a donut out of a crewman's mouth, puts it in her own, and then just keeps walking.
That's pretty awful, Murphy.
Murphy, check your privilege. It just looks like she's having a day.
But that's who Murphy is.
Exactly. She's like, no, I want this. So then we transition, and now the gang is there. And now there's a few more people. And we have Murphy. She's trying on different jackets with the wardrobe person. She tries on a purple and a coral. You have John, crewman John, Frank and Miles playing basketball in the middle of the space.
I kind of love this.
I love it. This is why I learned so much about. I'm also quite obsessed with behind the scenes thing. I mean, one of the reasons.
Oh yeah, we've talked about this. We
Yes,
both are.
I've watched the behind the scenes making of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits movies now more probably than the movies themselves, because I love the production aspect. So watching this and seeing just the little quirky nuances gives me so much information about these people that we don't need any lines for.
I love that Miles isn't really playing. He keeps sliding across.
Yeah, he's just kind of jumping.
He's trying, but he can't get in the game. He's like the little brother.
Yep. So, and it is. He's just trying so hard to be a part of it, and the other two are actually clearly full out trying to play.
So question. So with Corky, I couldn't tell if Frank grabs her ass or just squeezes her sides.
Oh, we're going to talk about it. So Corky is also there, and she is on the same side in the open space in front of the desks, but facing across the desk where it looks like maybe a line producer is standing. She's talking to another woman. And as she's sitting there, if you watch Frank, he reaches around, and what I'm wondering is if he's supposed to be grabbing her ass or just pinching her hips. Because it's wide, and I can't quite see. It looks like it might be a pinching action. Regardless, it's an invasion of her derriere space.
Yeah, and then she kicks Miles, thinking that
so
it's him.
it's not a full hand grasp the meat of the buttock, but it's definitely like grabs at her, and then he takes off, and she turns around, and the person right in front of her is Miles, so she kicks him in the lower back, which I love.
I want to think that Frank didn't grab her ass. It doesn't feel in character.
It looks like more of a tickle motion.
Yeah,
like he was trying to tickle her hip, lower
something
back.
you would do to your sister.
Exactly, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a sexual invasion of space.
Yeah, but the first time it did, and I had to watch it another time, and I was like, oh no, I don't think he does.
But her reaction is definitely an annoyed with her brother kind of reaction.
Yeah.
Like, she's just pissed. But she kicks Miles in the back, and what I love is Miles doesn't even do like a hey. He just looks around confused and then kind of just tries to get back into the basketball game. Like, I think he's just training to do his best. Frank, after this, kind of works his way back in after shoving the blame over, and makes a basket, throws up his fingers of victory, and kind of does like a victory run.
Yeah, he's pretty proud of himself there.
He's real proud of himself, which makes sense. And we transition, and now we're about to go to air. Murphy has apparently chosen a like highlighter yellow-green jacket.
Yeah, neo yellow-green.
I just wrote ew and all.
Neon yellow-green, that's what I wrote.
It is a neon. Jim is getting his makeup done. He's in the chair. He's got the thing where he's got the tissues over his collar.
I feel like people don't do that anymore.
Oh, they absolutely do.
Do they still do it?
Absolutely.
I feel like...
Because you don't get the makeup. I mean, they do it on women as well when they're getting their makeup done. You don't want to get makeup on the stuff. Frank is in his corner spot, and he's like drumming at stuff with pencils. Corky, I love it. She's blowing on her nails, which it's one of my favorite enjoyable pet peeves about film and people like looking rushed is this idea that they just did their nails and now they're blowing on them. That convention to me is so silly, because no way would she have just gotten her nails done.
Yes.
For an airing. But I love, you get the idea of these people.
Maybe it was a light gloss, like a clear gloss.
Perhaps. I just always am amused by it. I'm like, no one believes that you just got your nails done.
Yeah.
No one. Miles and Murphy are talking, and she's looking at her note card, so they're clearly talking about her segment, and then it transitions, and then we're at showtime, and John is rushing everybody off the set while he does his countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before, which you also alluded to and said it's so great to me to watch professionals working. I mean, obviously they're kind of not working, but getting ready, and the choice of the song I think is really interesting as well, because obviously you could say on the surface, we'll say a little prayer because someone's about to die.
Sure.
But I think also this is sort of a ritual, and maybe not necessarily religious, but like a sort of, pre-time before.
It is, absolutely.
And I feel like the song is reflecting more on that than necessarily what's going to happen next.
I would agree with that. I like just looking at what we're learning so much about these characters, about what each one of them needs to do to prep for their performance. Watching Corky in her workout clothes, having a conversation with somebody, then heading off to do things, and then watching, Jim isn't there until it's almost showtime.
Oh, that's true.
He's there when it's finally, he's in a suit, he has the tissues, he's getting everything finalized to go. We don't see him playing basketball, but we see the boys who need to just let loose. We see Murphy who's picking out like what she's going to look like to look the way she wants to, and then going over her cards. Like, we get an idea of what everyone's ritual is, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you, and this has to do with a comment we received.
Oh, okay, great.
So when Corky is speaking to who I think is probably a line producer,
Okay.
at first I was like, is that person a brunette or is that an Asian, like a woman of color who works on behind the scenes?
Oh, I don't know.
And I couldn't quite tell. But this was something that we were talking about wanting to see more diversity, and not just in front of the camera in this new production, in the revival. So I was thinking, beyond the fictional cast and crew of the show, we received some feedback about hopes for the revival. So this hope and call for diversity within the new show is something that we brought up on our last episode, talking about wanting to see more women in general, women of color, people of color, and there's a quote that Diane made that we had forgotten about that was brought to our attention.
Yes, it was, and I think it alludes to what we were talking about when we were talking about the secretary and My Dinner with Einstein and how rare that is. So Diane actually did respond to that question in an article in Vanity Fair, and she said that she felt that it was a shortcoming of ours. We don't want to make that mistake again.
And I appreciate that she says both in front of and behind the camera.
Yes, that's right.
I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Because we need to see everybody everywhere. But something we've talked about is it's great if you're seeing women and people of color represented more, but if the people telling the stories are just the same people as before, we're not getting the variety we're looking for. And the same thing with all levels of production.
Yeah, and to be able to admit that is
amazing.
Great.
And it gives me a lot of hope for this production.
Same here.
So we head into the episode, and she is in the middle of an interview.
Can I point out? Sitting on the wrong side.
I was about to say that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is sitting, and so what I wrote is that Murphy is on the left side for once, and it's brilliant blocking for what happens in the episode.
Oh, it's totally on purpose.
It's a genius move because no one can see him when he's dead, so that's why no one can figure it out. It's why she's the only one and she's stuck with it because everyone is behind this guy.
Obviously, Judge is like Barbra Streisand and likes to be seen from a certain side, and they had to change it up for him.
And that's fine.
It's okay.
It just means he dies. He dies. So she is grilling this guy who is a brilliant character actor that we've seen in many things. Because she says Judge, I immediately start seeing him as Antonin Scalia because I have a bit of a similar coloring. She's in the middle of talking to him about basically his integrity in the judicial system. And she is calling him out on what was a controversial decision. The defendant's name was Kaminsky, and he was charged with 5 building code violations. And she says that with all this proof and everything like that, this judge let him off with a slap on the wrist. And she asks, is he sure that there were no personal associations? And he says, absolutely not. It was the nuance of the case, and this is why. And of course, everyone's already like, because the man looks like a mobster. Well, I will say, the man looks like a cliche mobster.
There you go.
And she says, that's interesting because you were on Kaminsky's yacht a week before this decision. What I love is they cut to the gang at the desks and Frank looks so proud.
That's what I wrote.
And they all do. They all look so satisfied. But Frank looks so proud of her.
I wrote, Frank is damn proud.
Yes. I put a little heart in my notes because he was so proud of his buddy.
I also then wrote, did Candace get a haircut?
Yes, it's shorter. I noticed that.
I hate that I noticed that.
Why? I notice that all the time.
No, it's just, I shouldn't say hate. It's just, we've been watching it so closely. I noticed she got a haircut.
I do that all the time. It's fine.
Okay.
So the judge is dismayed and asks for evidence. And she holds up pictures and asks if that is maybe enough. And what I love is they cut to Miles and John and they clutch each other behind the camera. Everyone is so into this because she is nailing this guy to the wall. So she holds up the pictures, saying that I have these pictures. And she says, this one is you and with Mr. Kaminsky chatting on the bridge. And this one is you dancing with Mrs. Kaminsky. And then she says, and isn't that you at the buffet table? And hands all 3 of them. And he's looking at them. And he then turns around to look at the gang at the desks. And they all do these very interested eyebrow facial expressions like, we're waiting. I liked there's like a challenge in their eyes. Like, no, please go ahead. Respond.
We're not here to help you.
And it's great. What Murphy says is that what we're looking at, Judge, is a bench that has been influenced by power, blinded by special interest, and corrupted by greed. What is your explanation to the people you're supposed to serve? That line meant a lot to me as far as what's happening currently in our country. And then he looks down at the pictures and stays looking down. This is what we see. We see he looks down. He doesn't slump. There's nothing that happens. He just stays looking down.
Massive heart attack.
Was it? I have questions about this death.
Really? What do you...
Nothing happens.
But that's what they said happened on the Dick Cavett show. He just
but a
kinda
massive
slumped.
I mean, but for me, as somebody who's watching, it does look like he just looks down and then nothing happens to his body at all.
Well, I think also then it would give it away that to Murphy that he's dead at
Sure,
first.
but I'm saying from the logic police, he slumps down and stays looking down and nobody can tell what's going on. And Murphy, clearly not realizing what has happened and thinks maybe he's just staring at the pictures, starts to get real cocky and she starts throwing out really confident phrases like, "You can't stay silent forever," and "We're waiting, Judge Ferris." And then, like the many percussive things that happen in this show, thunk go his glasses out of his hands. And you can see on her face in that moment that she realizes what's going on.
Yeah, she knows.
It's great. You see everything happen, but you also see her holding her stuff together. And she looks to Miles for help, and he just gives her like a thumbs up. And then what I love is that she goes through this process of trying to get people to realize what has happened without freaking out on stage. But she does do this like panicked little scoot away in her chair for a second, as if she's trying to get away. And she tries to keep berating him, but by giving hints. So the judicial system in this country is dead. And I want to say, to his credit, Miles does figure out that something is off. He's not figuring out what it is because what's wrong with her? Like he knows she's off her game somehow. And the little antenna go up, but not enough for him to do anything.
I love the way she goes, "Dead," and like the side of her mouth.
Yeah, she throws it to them.
Yeah.
And so then she's desperate. She grabs a note card, turns it over, writes "dead" in capital letters on the back, and then does this really great pro move of kind of leaning back and dropping her hand so it just hangs down below camera, which is genius. And what I wrote is I go, "She's babbling about Babylonia." I crack myself up.
That's great. I also wrote that she's flustered and babbling.
Yeah, she goes like, and I realized that when I heard the term Babylonia, I was like, good job, girl. And John, king of the crew, crawls to her underneath camera angle and gets the card and brings it over and hands it to Miles, because John doesn't look at it, hands it to Miles, and Miles goes, "Dead. He's dead. Oh God, he's dead." And then he does this amazing grand physicality where he like lunges to the side and then is gesticulating with his arms over his head, saying, "Go to Jim. Go to Jim."
This is a very sort of Miles. This is what Grant does really well. This sort of anxiety, this high, this like sort of raspy, sort of like craziness in his voice. It's classic Miles.
This is some of my favorite Miles work. This kind of stuff.
Yeah, me too.
And because I'm an actor and I'm looking for these things, when they cut to the last shot that we see from Murphy's angle of Judge Ferris, the actor grips the paper for a second. Because I saw the paper move a little bit, and I was like, oh, maybe it's going to fall out. And then I just saw his finger kind of go back and hold it. I was like, oh, no. There's just a little movement of paper that's not supposed to be there. And she goes, "Judge Ferris, it looks like your time is up." And then does that thing that Candace does when she messes up. She just knows it and can't quite hold it.
Yeah, it's the same thing she did when she said Dorkman in the Einstein episode.
But she doesn't say it again louder this time.
Yeah, that's true.
And she says, "Thanks for being with us, and thanks for being such a good sport."
So the Judge Ferris, it looks like your time is up, and then she like does that wincing thing. This is not one of my favorite episodes. We'll talk more about that. But there are a couple of lines that I just cackled with laughter, and for some reason it's this one.
It's just so messed up.
It is, and just the way that she like catches herself, the Candace. I really just howled out loud.
I live for the uncomfortable humor in this episode.
That's what I wrote. I think I cackle at all the uncomfortable stuff
I love
this.
it.
Yeah.
It's such a release. So they cut to Jim, and Jim's trying to close it off, starting with thank you, Murphy, for that lively interview. But you don't really listen to the rest of it because the camera shot behind Jim is on the judge's face, and he slowly starts sliding off his chair in the shot behind it. The framing is genius.
Great framing.
And that's the end of the broadcast.
I thought particularly you would enjoy the Frank Fontana improvements in automatic safety.
Yes.
Are highways safer in 89?
Probably.
So we cut to the bullpen, maybe a couple days later, something like that.
It's been enough time that people have noticed.
Yeah, Corky comes in, and I wrote, my God, that walk.
Oh, love that Corky walk.
She's determined going forward. She's looking for Murphy because they were supposed to meet first thing this morning, and she was going to help her with her piece, and now it's after 11.
I wrote, yeah, women.
Me too. I wrote, oh my God, she's helping Corgi.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that, she begrudgingly, was going to help her, but it's the fact that she is helping her.
That is a huge step.
It's a huge step for her. So it's the third day in a row she's been late. Frank is worried. Jim says, come on, give her a chance. Murphy's tough as they come. She's weathered many a storm. She'll weather this. And then the elevator opens, and Murphy's in the back. And it's a full elevator. And she goes, excuse me, pardon me, my floor. And I wrote, Murphy's me in my 20s.
Oh, yeah.
And then the elevator door closes. And this is a stark contrast to, for example, my dinner with Einstein when the elevator
Screaming at
opens.
people.
And, we've talked about Murphy coming off the elevator will become this sort of iconic moment. And now the gang is in complete shock.
I wrote, Frank looks disturbed.
Yeah, as he should be.
His world has been rocked.
I mean, as far as he knows, she may have lost her mind.
Yeah, she may have.
So the door opens again, and Murphy comes out, and she has 2 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. Now, it's sort of interesting.
Not boxes. 2 boxes full of boxes of Girl Scout.
That's true.
2 larger boxes, cases. 2 cases of Girl Scout cookies.
That's a better thing. She's not just holding 2.
No, there are so many.
Excuse me, 2 boxes of boxes of
Yes.
boxes of Girl Scout cookies.
Boxes of boxes.
And I feel like the way that they've styled her is really on purpose because she has her hair sort of half up. And
Like Corky does.
Yes.
And she looks so young.
so young.
She looks like a baby.
She does. And
Also,
then,
kudos, Candace. You look great.
I mean, she's always looked great.
Yes, but dang, she could be playing a much younger version of herself in this moment.
Completely. And then the pale colors just make her look even younger
The
with
big
the makeup.
sweater.
Yeah, she looks so angelic.
She really does. And she's got that, she's got, for me, what look like crazy eyes because she's so gentle and her eyes are open like
Yeah.
Bambi. And you're just like,
And she apologizes, guys.
She does.
Murphy apologizes for being late. She's really sorry.
And Corky is just shaken.
It's okay. And then I wrote, Frank is in shock. Shock, I tell you, shock.
He's horrified by this.
So Murphy bought all of the Girl Scout cookies from this girl in the lobby. She was 2 cartons short of her quota. She looked so sad in her little hat and her green dress.
I just love this entire segment. She's speaking so delicately.
She is.
It's so delicate.
Were you a Girl Scout?
I stopped at brownies.
Oh, okay. I went to my silver award.
I was even as a child, I was too busy for my own good. And so when I realized that I had people I could get the cookies from, I decided to focus my time on the theater arts and tennis and all these things that I was already doing.
My mother was also the leader, so that helped.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And everyone said the silver award would look great on my college application.
Did it?
I don't think so. I just remember being forced to get the silver award. I had to spend a lot of weekends at the recycling plant helping. It kind of sucked.
Hey, my nieces are Girl Scouts, and I'm super proud of the work they're
But
doing.
recycling is great.
Not to besmirch the Girl Scouts. They are wonderful.
I loved being a Girl Scout.
Yeah.
I loved it. I really did. Particularly loved the cookies.
I love those cookies.
Yeah. And him coming up to one of my favorite lines. So Murphy, she feels that, she besides the point is that she wants to show her appreciation to the staff. She takes a box of cookies. She goes over to Marv. Marv, thanks for washing out those coffee mugs last night. Takes another box over to Fran. This is the first time we know her name is Fran, right?
Yeah.
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 And she goes, Fran, you're a kind and decent person. Have a box of Thin Mints.
I think that's a pretty good standard for life.
I want to put that on a sticker.
Kind and decent person.
I
Here's
love
a
it.
box of Thin Mints.
Yeah, we all should be given a box of Thin Mints for being a kind and decent person.
I don't think there should be a reward for that. I think we just should be.
Well, yes. That's true. I'm
we
just
gotta
being
start,
funny.
We got to start somewhere, Lauren. Start with the Thin Mints.
Just trying to be funny.
I'm supporting your choices.
Thank you. I appreciate you supporting my choices.
Toward my like Gene Roddenberry goal of equality in the world.
Oh, nice. So she thanks her friends for being a really wonderful group of friends. She's over the Judge Ferris thing. She tells them, stop sitting around with these long faces. We've got a show to produce.
I wrote boop boop be doop. It's like we've got a show to produce.
I was like,
it's so
I wrote, she's Judy Garland and she's going to get a barn.
Exactly.
Let's put on the show, Mickey Rooney.
We've got a show to produce. I was like, I was actually a little disgusted.
So she goes to meet her new secretary, who is just watching a soap opera on the most 80s huge television set.
The only thing I wrote was her, because the only thing she says is, that is not your baby.
Yeah, so we know she's watching a soap
Totally.
opera. But this reminded me, I've sort of forgotten, is that my family had this sort of yellow Sportsman, like a Walkman type thing, TV. Mm-hmm. And it was black and white, and we'd bring it to the beach. Mm-hmm. But during the non-summers, I would sneak it up into my room and watch David Letterman.
Our TVs were way too big for me to be a transport anywhere.
It was
There were the big CR ones.
No, it was a travel.
Yeah, we did not have travel TVs. That was not a luxury we got in the Midwest.
It was a big deal that we got it.
Yeah, that is alien to me.
Miles comes off the elevator and really just chews her out because he got chewed out by financial affairs because Murphy decided that she needed to have a corned beef sandwich flown in from the stage deli to Reykjavik. But Murphy's fine with it. She doesn't blame Miles for being upset, and she's sorry. She wasn't thinking, and it'll never happen again. Miles is afraid that she's going to do something later, like crazy glue on his toilet seat. But Murphy thinks that would be very childish. So Miles still thinks, so it's not crazy glue? Does it involve farm animals? So he's thrown, but Murphy realized she needed to talk to Miles about her Brad Stockton interview. Frank is so impressed. No one's been able to get word one out of him since his indictment. She'll eviscerate him. But she doesn't want the interview. She thinks that Frank should do it. In fact, when he says, that she's going to, set him on fire, is that what he says at some point?
I think so.
He's been milking old people out of their retirement, and that makes her very uncomfortable, that she's going to hurt him in some way. And everyone's, really shocked. But Murphy, doesn't want this sort of plum assignment. She really thinks that Frank should do it. And then she asks Frank how his mother is.
Which never happens.
Yeah. In fact, she's never met his mother, we'll find out. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. She pulls out a box, and it's wrapped, and she gives it to Frank because she's bought Frank's mother a Hummel figurine.
Ugh, Hummels.
Kind of Hummel figurines will kind of become a little bit of a running joke.
They will. They're still jokes. They joke about Hummels in Psych.
It's a funny thing to say, I guess.
Hummel, and they're creepy.
They're a little creepy.
They're creepy little people.
So Phil comes off the elevator. Hey there, Murphy. He's delivering her lunch personally because she hasn't been down. And I'm assuming she hasn't come because she knows what Phil's going to say.
Yep.
She doesn't want to hear it. She's sort of inverted into herself. But she's been busy, nothing reason. And he's like, Murphy, it wasn't your fault that guy croaked. And says that someone once died in Phil's, was it all you can eat night he decided to do? Biggest mistake for Phil. The last thing he said was, oh boy, burritos. I kind of just love that.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah. And then we cut to the townhouse.
So before we move on the episode, we have another set of thoughts from Denise about the concept behind this episode and why to do it. She said, I think we came up with the idea that it made her question herself to the point of going soft. I'm pretty sure we came up with the selling of Girl Scout cookies. We may have even had the therapy idea, not sure. In those days, we were still freelancers when there was such a thing. And this is great what she talked about pitching the idea. So she says they'd been given advice early in our pitching career, to walk in with enough story ideas that you'd be thrown out before you ran out, which I love. Diane would like something and we'd come back with a story beaten out the way we saw it going. That's how she worked with all freelancers, and I think it's a great way to have people pitch, even on staff. It forces you to work out an idea from the beginning to the end without the help of a table of writers. It makes you a better writer in the long run, though it was nerve-wracking to say the least. So what came from us and what came from the table after that is fuzzy on her end.
Yeah, but that's really interesting because it's another example of constraints forcing you to be more creative and be a better artist.
Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of have more than...
Be overly prepared.
I love that. So we are at the townhouse, and townhouse is looking a little different at the moment. There are covers over everything. All the furniture is pushed to the sides, and Murphy's actually sitting on the back of her couch, which has like a slipcover drape thing over it. And Eldon is sanding the floor of her living room, and she is sitting back there reading, going through stuff, acting like nothing's happening. And Eldon is making so much noise.
I wrote, for Christ's sake, Eldon.
That's what she should be saying, but she's not. And and I've worked with floor sanders before. It is so loud and so annoying to be around. And what I like is that he keeps eyeing her. Clearly, Eldon has figured out this is not okay. He's eyeing her. He finally stops. Then he looks at his watch and goes, "Hey, would you look at what time it is? It's late and I'm still sanding." And he does this like hand slap on his thighs like a boy, oh boy. He's like, "Talk about inconsiderate. Why, someone ought to tell me to go home or something." And she goes, "Oh, it's okay. No, you said it needed sanding. You're just doing your job." And then she does this little spin off the back of the couch, gets off the couch and just goes right into the kitchen. And you can tell he, like Frank, is disturbed. Mm-hmm. So he exasperated says, "I may have to take apart your shower next." And there's a ding dong at the bell. And he's like, "That could take days." And, she goes, and from the kitchen, she goes, "Okie dokie."
I don't think okie dokie is in Murphy Brown's vocabulary.
I'm not sure she'd ever said it before. Mm-mm. Eldon is like grumbling to himself as he's wont to do and opens the door, and Frank is standing there. And the first thing we hear is, "How is she?" And Eldon goes, "Not good. She's in the kitchen making Rice Krispie balls."
The way that Rob Pastorelli says balls. Pretty damn funny.
It's good.
And I'm glad that it wasn't treats.
Yes.
Balls is just funnier.
It's always funnier to have balls.
Yeah, pretty much.
So he says he's tried everything. The woman is ill. And what I love is this next section of the two of them. I wrote that they are acting like they are watching war. Like they are,
Yes.
They are so intense. Like they're watching they have witnessed something that is so messed up. He says, "Yesterday, I caught her listening to a Captain Tennille album," which I love the fact that the second he says that, the audience is losing it.
They've lost it, yeah.
And Frank looks so concerned. He says, "When it got to Muskrat Love," and his voice catches, like he's emotionally affected by this. He's like, "She sang along."
I laughed. This is the second.
I laughed so hard because my family loves that album. I know every song on that album, so I know exactly how annoying that would be to Murphy.
Again, there's 3 times here where I just cackled.
Oh, I was crying with laughter.
That was the one.
And Frank buries his head in his hands. And at first I thought it's because Joe was breaking, but that is absolutely part of their witnessing war thing.
So did I, and I watched it again, and I went, no, he's not breaking. But I wrote, Frank buries his hand in his face, or is Joe laughing? The world may never know.
Oh God, they're just so serious. And Murphy comes out, and she's holding like a wooden spoon, which doesn't make sense if she's making Rice Krispies, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway.
Oh wait, the butter.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So she comes out holding a wooden spoon, and I wrote, her apron looks like that 1980s Betty Crocker book all of our moms had.
I wrote the 1980s pasta sauce ad.
Mm-hmm. She's telling Frank that she's fine. Eldon just kind of walks off into the back, and he even kind of puts his hand to his face for a second. And she said, "No, I'm fine. Actually, she was on the phone with Gerald Ford's publicist, and she thinks that now is a good time to reevaluate his presidency."
The 70s are very hot, Frank.
The 70s are very hot, Frank. Frank turns to her and says he needs to talk. And he says, "Buddies, heart to heart."
I love that.
Oh, I love them in this episode. She says she has work to do. She picks up this book. She says, "I haven't even got to the part where he fought the battle against swine flu." And Frank goes, "Oh, come on." Which he is done. And I love that he's not tiptoeing around. It reminds me of the
CJ
Off the Job.
Toby? Off
the Job Experience.
Yes, this
when
scene
he shows up to like get her out of a funk.
This scene is very remnants of that scene.
Except that there is a uncomfortably kind of sexual twist to this pep talk, which we will talk about in a second.
Yes.
Murphy starts saying that she wonders if she goes over the line sometimes. She says, "Just because I'm a journalist, does that give me the license to push people past the brink?"
It's really good.
And Frank immediately stands up and says, "No, we're supposed to push for answers. That's what we always do." And except that this time someone happened to stop living. It doesn't mean that you're responsible. And what I love is that phrasing, that he stops, he takes the pause and he goes, "And someone happened to stop living."
It's so compassionate the way he says it to her.
Because that particular phrasing takes away any connection to her. It takes away any responsibility. It's like someone didn't die, someone did whatever. It was that someone just stopped living. They did it. Their body did it. You didn't do it. Which I just, it's such a particular phrase, and I love that. And Murphy says, I know. I just can't seem to get back on track.
This is a really great sort of moment, I think, that she admits that.
Yeah.
She intellectually gets it.
Yep. I love that. She knows that she's being ridiculous.
But she just can't seem to shake it.
Yep. And Frank says, I didn't want to bring this up, but have you thought about seeing someone? She like throws her glasses off and stands up and she says, you mean a shrink? And she then says, no way. And I love the number here threw me a little bit because I had to go back and re-listen. I spent my 31 days at Betty Ford.
Oh, yeah. I thought you said 30 days.
Me too. And I was like, wait, it is 31. No way. I spent my 31 days at Betty Ford. I learned everything about myself that I'll ever need to know, which we know as fans of Murphy. No, you didn't.
No.
I mean, how many times can you relive your childhood, talk about that dream where you're tumbling down a train tunnel and you end up falling onto a bed covered with cats and Siskel and Ebert are there? I appreciate your concern, but I can work this out myself.
I also appreciate that, is that she thanks Frank.
Yeah. She's like, I know you love me.
Yeah,
but
let me just deal with this myself. And sometimes that's what you have to do in a friendship.
I also love her ridiculous dream, starring Siskel and Ebert and some cats.
A recurring dream.
Yes, she doesn't like trains.
Well, she's had train dreams before.
Yeah, but I think that they're not the best.
Well, she did have a train dream about Jerry.
Yeah. So Frank then does the thing that I love that they do in theater and in television, where he like gets to her side and starts to like visually paint a picture.
Yes.
For her with his hand. It's very like musical theater. Like, look this way. Look at this. And of the interview she did with Reverend Billings, he says, I know we love this because of our logo. You have on your favorite red blazer, the one that makes you say, I am the huntress.
And I remembered that when we talked about respect.
Yep.
I couldn't remember what episode it was from, but I knew that she makes her feel like the huntress.
Exactly.
And you know it's that particular suit jacket because it's a hunting jacket.
Yep. It's amazing.
Ugh.
And she does something where she asks him to stop. And it's starting to get very heightened, and it's like she's a junkie avoiding the temptation, which makes sense for her. And he says, the lights are beating down. Then you feel your pulse start to quicken. This is when I started being like, this is getting very descriptive, Frank. And and then you ask him the question. And she's like, I don't remember. I don't know. And he said, what was that? And she just, it's the like, oh no, I couldn't possibly, but maybe I might give into this.
Have you ever been to the Bahamas?
Have you ever been to the Bahamas? And he goes, oh, that's not the way you said it that night.
Have you ever been to the Bahamas?
No, but here's the thing.
Okay.
The way he says, oh, it's not the way you said it that night. I was like, it's like an interrogation and a sex dance. And it
kind of is.
I'm both very into it and very uncomfortable that I'm watching it right now, because Candice Bergen is doing this amazing where she's like breathing and looking around and trying not. They are selling.
She is fighting it.
It's a very wonderful scene between the two of them. And yes, and then he says, keep saying it. And he says, make her say, he tries to make her say it the way she said it then. And she does another.
Have you ever been to the Bahamas?
Sounds like a real wuss question to me.
Have you ever been to the Bahamas?
And then he has her say it again and again. And then all of a sudden Murphy is back and she's phrasing it the way she said it. And she's like attacking, being like, and goes off. And then Frank whips around and starts to pretend to be the Reverend, who is just breaking beneath this. And you can see just you can see the fire between them. And then they smile at each other. And he goes, how do you feel?
The hair on my arms are standing on end.
And he goes, you want that Stockton interview, don't you?
I want it bad.
How bad?
And I wrote, this is like the scene in Off the Job Experience.
Yes.
He's dogging her on. He's getting her to do it.
She just goes, real bad. And then he says, now, then get to work. And she goes, I'll be ready. And he just says, I know you will.
And I wrote, friendship.
I love them. And as he's walking away, she kind of quietly thanks him. And he does the best Frankism, where she goes, what did I do? And waves her away.
Yeah, it's the arm, the waving.
And she's like, what did I do? And waves her away and walks away. And it's just you did all of this. This was you. Don't worry about it.
It shows how well they balance each other as friends and why they work.
Yep. I just wrote, I love him so much.
Yeah. So we cut to the studio, and Jim goes, there he is, Brad Stockton, a pathetic piece of humanity.
I love you, Jim.
Yeah. But Murphy goes, don't worry, Jim, he's shark bait. She's ready. They're, psyching her up. Is that sort of a olive green shiny suit thing, kind of like the blue one that she has?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
So Miles found out that someone opened an inflatable raft in his car. Frank smiles. Murphy looks at Miles, and he just gives her this big bear hug. He's like, welcome back, Murphy. Frank looks like he might laugh. The way that Grant lifts up from the hug and puts his hand on Candace's face, I wrote, this feels like Grant and Candace. This doesn't feel like Grant.
It's such the actors loving each other.
Yeah, because they obviously have, we know have a really, everyone has a great relationship, but they have a very special chemistry. John tells Murphy, nail him, Murphy, we're counting on you.
I love that. It's just like teamwork. Everyone hates this guy.
The show starts. The interview segment is called The High Cost of Success. And the interview, is going well, but then Stockton starts to cough.
Well, okay, so what I like is as the interview is going well, they do the same thing they did in the first episode, and they cut back to the gang for a second. And Frank does this little, shoulder bump to Jim, but she's back. And then Stockton coughs.
Yeah, and I wrote she kind of turns into a mother. Are you all right?
Yeah, I was like, she loses her edge.
Do you want some water? And she completely loses it. She looks like a deer in the headlights. She looks at Miles. She can't seem to speak.
She's stuck.
She's so thrown. And so she then goes into a rant because frozen yogurt is one of the, I guess, the big swindle that he did to get money out of a lot of these old people. And so she decides to get him on that.
The calories.
Yeah. We need to get to the bottom of frozen yogurt. Is it really? It can't be true that it really has less fat than ice cream. And I just quickly wanted to do a frozen yogurt sidebar.
Oh, good.
Because
always.
People, I think, don't realize how popular frozen yogurt was at this time.
Oh, my God. It was everywhere.
And so I was obsessed with TCBY.
Oh, yeah.
TCBY reminds me of my childhood and Murphy Brown, and almost every weekend we would go to TCBY and I would get the golden vanilla, French golden vanilla, with butterscotch chips and M&Ms.
Oh, what a lovely little combo.
And I would particularly ask for them to put it in the shake cup because it wasn't styrofoam.
You are Eldon.
And then we cut to Murphy being in group therapy.
Best.
A Harold Ramis lookalike, which is what I wrote down.
Stop. No, I literally have slow pan to guy I thought was Harold Ramis until there was no applause. He looks exactly like a young Harold Ramis.
He really does. And he's talking about having a anxiety attack over picking stereo equipment.
He can't make decisions.
Murphy sort of looks off to the side. This really great comic take, what is happening? Beautiful sort of yellow, sort of canary yellow jacket. We have this sort of young, dumb looking biker guy.
I put biker emo kid.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much says something to the effect of "we're all dying," which gets a really big laugh. And I'm like, I don't think it's that funny, guys. But
I think he was probably really funny on set.
Probably because his next line is really funny. Sometimes I think, this might be a second take and people are laughing at something that's coming next. And they don't really
also know
it.
that this is this guy's joke.
Yeah. And we have an older man. We have a mother, Joan, who says, big wow. You want to have an anxiety attack? Try taking 4 kids to Pizza Hut.
So I'm going to need to pause you there. The older man is not just an older man. That is Robert Trebor.
Oh, I thought he looked familiar.
Robert Trebor. I knew, some people may know from Son of Sam as the bad guy.
Oh my God, he's so great in that film.
More importantly, I know him as Salmonius from Herc and Xena, as a very big, flamboyantly ridiculous salesman in the Herc and Xena-verse. This will shock no one, spent most of my childhood rushing home so that I could watch Hercules and Xena back to back. They are my everything. And I loved Salmonius, also hated him in some episodes. But regardless, I knew Robert Trebor very well. And when I was working at the last place I was ever a server in New York City, in Times Square, I was working some random midweek shift. And I was working in the upstairs section of the restaurant. I was by myself. And this duo came in and sat at the front windows, and I walked over, and the second I looked at the man of the two, I realized it was Robert Trebor. And I lost my mind, kept my cool, because I'm a professional, and I got their stuff. I just kept staring, and I kept double-checking. I kept finding reasons to kind of go in the vicinity so I could get a different angle to make sure that I was right so I could hear his voice. It was definitely Robert Trebor. So I spent the entire dinner early dinner, serving them, and they're being perfectly nice and whatever. And the funny part is at this point, I have met some of my major heroes in New York City. I have come across them. I've talked to them on the phone. I've done various things where I've met heroes who are the big names that everyone and listening would recognize. This was the one that made me so nervous. And maybe it's because I had a one-on-one thing going with them, whatever it was, but it was so specific to my fandom and my childhood that it felt incredibly personal. And so I did something that I normally don't do. And as I was dropping the check, I think I was actually bringing the finalized check because I didn't want to say anything before they looked at a tip or anything like that. I didn't want to make them feel like they had to owe anything.
Oh, yeah.
So I was bringing the final check and I set it down. I was like, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that I'm a huge fan of yours. Salmonius was a huge part of my childhood, and I just have loved your work. And he was very sweet about it. And he's like, thank you so much. You could tell he was the type of guy who doesn't get recognized that often. And he was just very, very kind. And I walked away and I was like, okay, I'm not fired. Nobody's mad at me. I did it. And I move on. And then I go and pick up the check after they have left. And there is more of a tip than there was to begin with. And there was his business card for Palindrome Productions, because his stage name is a palindrome. He changed it from Robert Schenkman to Robert Trebor. And on the back is written, "A cheery day from Salmonius, signed Robert Trebor." And I still have it, and I'm showing it to Lauren right now, and she looks like she's going to cry.
Jesi. How kind.
He's just one of my favorite New York stories.
That's so sweet.
And I was so excited to see him in this episode because I didn't realize it was him.
I'm glad that you brought him up because he was so familiar and I couldn't realize what I knew him from. And there were so many people to talk about for this episode. So I focused on some other people. I realized we didn't talk about Stephen Culp.
Oh,
who plays
my gosh,
Brad
Stephen
Stockton.
Culp.
Or I like to call him Speaker of the House Halfley, son of a bitch,
I
on
saw
the West Wing.
That guy whose face I think is shitty from the 90s, and I hate him. I love hating him on screen.
So I was on the Television Without Pity message boards a lot in the day.
I loved Twop.
It was the best.
It's best.
We used to refer to him, I think it was on that board, because he played Speaker of the House Halfley on the West Wing as Halfley's son of a bitch, because he was just such an awful person. And he's Bree's first husband on Desperate Housewives. He's, except for playing RFK and JFK, mostly played kind of horrendous people. But he's very good at it.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sure he's a very nice man, but I love hating Stephen Culp on screen because he plays such horrible people.
He's horrible on the West Wing. We hated him.
Randomly speaking of West Wing, my Robert Trebor played the son of Sam in Out of Darkness opposite Martin Sheen.
Oh, hey.
Yep. And I'll share something. There's a very interesting article from 2014 about Robert Trebor wrote a script about his brush with leukemia.
Oh, interesting.
And which he's fine, guys. He was just in Hail Caesar in 2016. He's doing fine. But I'll share that because I think it's a very interesting story, but to talk about later. But anyway, that's Jeffrey at Group Therapy as my personal hero.
That's great.
Robert Trebor, who's just a class act through and through.
And Joan, the mom, is Mary Catherine Wright, who is another one of those sort of character actors. I think mostly for the theater you might know her, but
yes,
she's very specific and very distinct as she is in this episode. Most recently, she was on Search Party. She was on Picket Fences and Empty Nest, and I feel like more people will probably know her as the nurse in Awakenings. But her big thing was in 1981, she was in an off-Broadway production of Christopher Durang's Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It All for You. But back to the episode. So Jeffrey has actually been coming to therapy for 5 years, and so he doesn't feel like an outcast anymore because there's someone new. Great way to put in that information, by the way. Really, really great.
Oh, wow.
And she hasn't talked the entire time.
Which surprises no one.
No. Well, Joan/mom, I wrote, because we don't know their names till as it goes along, so
Yeah.
I'm typing as we're going.
Joan has opinions.
Yes, she does, and I'm going to mention something that I think about her later.
I know what you're
Yes.
going to say.
So Joan doesn't think that Murphy wants to be here at all, that she'd rather be skiing in Aspen with Don Johnson. And she goes, no, I want to be here. And the young guy goes, why? You'll never get better.
This is when I started loving him.
No, I'll tell you when I really loved him. The doctor feels that the group is treating Murphy differently because she's famous, and it doesn't mean she doesn't have problems like the rest of us. There you go. And then the young kid, again, this was my third big laugh of the entire thing. She goes, she killed that guy on TV. I did not. Then Jeff confesses his love to Barry, the Harold Ramis lookalike.
What I love is he turns to me, he's like, Murphy, I care about you. I love you. And then looks to each person one at a time and says, I love you. And then he says, he loves Barry most of all. And he says, but I mean it. I love you. And he goes, there, I said it. Finally, I'm free. He has this amazing moment.
It's really great. And what I love is that it's not played for the laughs that he's gay. It's played for the laughs that he's just making the guy uncomfortable.
He's just making him say, it has nothing to do with the fact that he's... Now, Joan makes it about the fact that he's gay, which I know you want to talk about in a second. But I just love, again, this is something we have talked about with situational comedy, is that the funny is not in... the line reveal about who he is. It's what he is doing, the way he is overdoing, the way he is leaning over the arm of the chair toward Barry, the way Barry is just trying to survive this right now, because I think Barry kind of already knew. And then just the release that Jeff gets to then have in this breakthrough that he finally got it out there, and he's just so happy. He's not even waiting for a response. He's just so happy that he got it out.
So Joan isn't happy. She says a horrible line, which I don't feel as the writers, I feel as the character.
Yes, no, I agree.
Yes.
We're supposed to dislike her.
We're supposed to. She goes, there are enough fruits in the world already, which is a terrible word, in this context. And I wrote, Joan is bitter and a little homophobic.
Yeah, she's, I think, a bit of a bigot.
Yes. And she goes, that's why women turn bitter. That's why women kill.
And she just looks at Murphy.
Okay, I had a fourth laugh. That one was actually really funny.
That one slayed me. I was like, that's why women kill.
And then Murphy says that she would like to say something, and she doesn't understand how this is supposed to help her, And the doctor asks the group how it's supposed to help her, and they give her this big hug. And I love that because we need to see Murphy and not everyone else, they kind of all lower their heads as they hug her, and so it's like she's just like in this mass of like people.
It's so cute.
She's super weirded out. Candace's eyes are just fantastic.
Everywhere.
Her eyes in this entire scene are great. She tells so much without saying a word.
Oh my God.
And she says she doesn't have time to sit around and hug all day. She has a job, which I also really love. She wants to talk about her problem, get her answer, and go. This is classic Murphy.
Yep.
She doesn't want to waste a lot of time. She wants it fixed. She wants it done now. She doesn't want to put the work into it. She just wants it done.
No.
Yeah. And this is a major failing of Murphy, and why she, unfortunately, I think, is not able to keep a lot of relationships.
Yeah.
And we'll see more about that as we go into the revival. Murphy's problem with therapy is just a bunch of yakking about yourself for a few years. And I thought this was interesting that she thinks it's very self-indulgent. And the way that she says it, it sounds very serious. I don't think...
let's face it, it's all pretty self-indulgent.
Yeah, usually when Murphy is hiding something, we can tell. And I think she really does believe that. And for someone who's so self-involved, it's interesting. But then again, she doesn't necessarily like to talk about herself. She holds in her feelings a lot. So that could be it.
I just want to say, for the people listening... I think everyone should be in therapy.
Agreed.
Therapy is a wonderful thing.
It's fantastic.
As is proven by how this conversation goes.
So what's also interesting is the doctor says that she feels that people need a safe place, very modern word right now, to share their feelings, that Murphy's just afraid to share hers. Yes, she is. Murphy is afraid.
Yes.
And then Murphy begins to berate the doctor as if it's a hard-hitting interview.
So I have a couple things.
Yes, please.
One... I have what the doctor says back to her written out because I love it so much.
Please.
And I also want to talk about Janet McLaughlin.
Me too.
The brilliant actress.
I'm so excited to talk about her.
Kudos for the fact that Murphy went to a practitioner of color.
Yes.
Because it's great to see someone of color in a power position.
I agree. I was very excited about this casting.
Not just a secretary, not someone in the background, but like a power position who actually owns her as well. So the line that she says to her, which I love because Murphy's starting to berate her and try to interrogate her like she's back on the set, is the first thing she says is, "Do your research, Murphy." In the very like, bring it. And I because that is the thing that's going to get Murphy. That's how you know this woman is good. It's
she treats everyone differently, and she knows this is the tactic that's going to help Murphy.
And also she knows that accusing a journalist of not doing their research, that's going to call her. So she says, "Do your research, Murphy. It took me 8 years at Stanford to practice what you call garbage. I've helped an awful lot of people." And I just, the way that Janet says this line, I completely believe that she is a successful professional who is not afraid of Murphy Brown. And I love it. So Janet, unfortunately passed away in 2010 at the age of 77. But she left quite the filmography behind her. I know her first from, we talked about this, we both had a favorite 90s comedy, Heart and Souls.
Oh my God, guys, please see Heart and Souls.
You guys, I saw her. So we have a rundown for every episode that's like the main things that aren't our separate notes that we know we're going to talk about. And Lauren had already filled in some stuff about Janet, and she had Heart and Souls. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about Heart and Souls.
And I was in shock that Jesi knew Heart and Souls
I
because
loved
it's
this
not
movie.
that known. Robert Downey Jr., guys.
Yeah, adorably.
Adorably, in comedy, Alfre Woodward,
She breaks my heart. in this
Charles
movie.
Grodin, Kira
Keira
Sedgwick.
It's
A guy who should be Robert Pastorelli, but
Yes.
that's another story.
it's not.
And music by Mark Shaman.
Yep. This, guys, I assume most of the people listening to this probably do know Heart and Souls. But if you're listening to this podcast and you have not watched Heart and Souls, go find it. It's a lovely little movie.
It's lovely in that 90s wonderful way.
However, I then also knew Janet from a couple things you hear me talk about a lot, like Murder, She Wrote. She was in 2 episodes. Most importantly, she was in an episode with another of our guest actors on Murphy Brown. She was in the Jessica Behind Bars episode, where she also plays a doctor. So the interesting thing about Jessica Behind Bars is that it also co-starred Donna Ponterato, who we met in Why Do Fools Fall in Love as Felicia. And she also was in Star Trek, the original series, as Lieutenant Charlene Masters in The Alternative Factor. Gene Roddenberry believed in making a world that was how he wanted the world to be, and not what it is right now, which included the casting of Uhura and this kind of stuff. And so I love that we saw a lieutenant who is a woman of color who was also in that original series. It's not without its faults, but the fact that was a place for actresses of color to work and have significant roles is a beautiful thing.
She always played very strong characters, and I realized that she was also in a 1980 film called For Keeps with Molly Ringwald that I watched a lot on cable, and it's about a teenage couple who get pregnant and try to, they keep the baby and try to live adult lives. And it's a comedy, but it's very realistic. And I realized that it was this and Murphy Brown that made me see, oh, pregnancy's hard.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't do that.
Maybe.
Not
we should-
ever, just like as a child.
Maybe I should consider it before I do things that would make that happen.
Just because when we get to talking more about Dan Quayle, it pisses me the hell off that I, as a 14-year-old, was not smart enough to look at this rich white lady and go, you know what? She messed up and got pregnant. Maybe it could happen to me. Maybe I shouldn't have sex yet. Not that I had any opportunities in
I was
high
like,
school.
I had 0 opportunities at that point, so it wasn't even a problem.
I had no opportunities. But I'm just saying that this whole idea,
Yeah.
it's a little sidebar that
Yes.
we'll get more about
Yes.
later. So,
Murphy doesn't react very well to that being admonished.
no,
in
and my
such a way.
favorite part of her little sort of, interview type thing with, the doctor is she goes, and it all ends with you just, taking their money and going, that's good. You're really growing emotionally. It's the way that Candace says it is
Yep.
really fantastic. And the doctor goes, good for you, Murphy. And Murphy
so
doesn't get it. She's
confused.
like, good for me what? And she just sort of gets this like giddy little smile on her face. Like she's just so giddy. She's just, wait a minute.
Well, no, because the doctor says, I'm not dead, am I?
That's right. Yeah.
She says, you were tough on me, and I'm still here. And then Murphy, she gets a smile on
Yeah.
her face.
And she doesn't know what to say. She feels great. She feels better than she's felt in a long time. And, she can't believe it's done. Therapy is pretty much over for Murphy.
She's like, I can't believe you did that. That was
Wow.
really good. I'm cured. Da-da-da-da.
She's parked in a loading zone.
Better get out of there.
Yeah, so
Which
she-
I love that she parked in
And
the
I know, and she's like shakes everyone's hand and does sort of, I call it movie star Murphy,
Yeah, you can get a
need-
set tour.
need anything, set tour, let me know, putting on sort of the professional face. But she leaves and forgets her purse, since the doctor points out that maybe she doesn't really want to leave. Murphy doesn't think that every behavior means something, and I do love this part too. She goes, as Freud said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. She gives a really big grin. But the doctor gets Murphy to stay, and Murphy just is there to listen. She's not going to really say anything. But the next thing we know,
What? I love that they're like,
What?
I haven't had any of this dip yet.
oh, the dip part, yeah.
And the biker goes, I made it. And then she immediately doesn't want that dip.
She just leaves the piece of celery in the middle of the dip. And Murphy acts like she's not going to say anything, but she immediately just interrupts and goes right into her train dream.
Oh, the train.
And then the show ends.
So, to finish off this episode, there was a final tidbit from Denise. Denise says, but here's an interesting sidebar. Cy also knew that Candace had nearly suffered from a similar situation as Kavitz in real life. Kavit is the interviewer we talked about at the top. Cy and I talked about it with Candace over a pre-show dinner one night. That I remember so clearly. Cy and me dressed for the show and gorgeous, glamorous Candace in a fuzzy robe. Anyway, when Candace was still a journalist, she wrote an extensive piece on Oscar Levant, the great musician and wit from the 1940s. She interviewed him once and came back for a follow-up, only when his wife went to get him, she discovered that he had died. Candace was really shaken by it at the time. That was one of my fondest memories of working with Candace, but there were so many. I cannot imagine. And so that's why I just want to give so many props to what Candace does in this episode, because she not only has her excellent acting training behind her, but she also has this excellent writing that gives her stuff. And then she has Frank next to her who's we have Joe giving her all the stuff. But she also has a very personal experience with something like this. And with I have nothing close to what this must feel like.
She could have went, you know what, guys, I don't want to do this story.
Yeah.
But she knew it was funny. And so she was, let them do it.
But I see a lot of the nuance in what she does in this piece. And there's a lot of nuance. And you know what? Maybe it has nothing to do with it. Maybe she never even connected it on set. But I see a lot of nuance in her performance. And I just want to give her a lot of credit.
So if you are not following us on social media, we recommend that you do.
We're hilarious.
We are. We post a lot of really interesting things that we allude to in the episodes or news or fun things that people say about Murphy Brown, news on the revival. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitter.
The Twitter.
At Murphy Brown Pod.
You can find our website is murphybrownpod.com. Or if you have thoughts you want to reach out directly, you can email us at murphybrownpod@gmail.com.
Would also love if you could drop us a review on iTunes. It would mean so much. It's a free way to support the podcast.
You can listen to our Spotify playlist. It's called the Murphy Brown Empowerment Playlist. It's music from and inspired by Murphy Brown. And if you don't know how to get to Spotify, we also have a link to that on the website.
And if you aren't subscribing to the podcast, please do. Then you don't have to go looking for the episodes. They will download to the device in which you listen to podcasts.
Just be waiting for you. You're welcome.
Ding.
Ding. And our next episode will be episode 20, Summer of 77, one of our personal favorites.
And we'll see you next week
For another edition of FYI.
the Murphy Brown Podcast.